Hi, this is Stan. Welcome back to the Crow's Nest Railroad. Well, I've got another project to get started on, and one I'm a little bit nervous about. So if that sounds interesting, stay tuned. All right, well, you decided to come back. Let's just take a look at what I've got planned. So you can see Rodney in the train here, and if I want to change positions on any of these cars, maybe have Rodney push a car for some cartage reasons or whatever, anytime I want to change the configuration, I literally have to pick up the cars, get them off the track, move things around by lifting them and then re-railing everything. So what I've really wanted is at least one spur that I can use to shunt some cars around, and of course that means building a switch, and I've not built a switch before, so I'm a little nervous about that. So I mentioned in a previous video that I wanted to utilize this space back here for a siding. I want a spur to come off here. There's plenty of room, and this is sort of an unused part of our property back here. So this would be the perfect spot for it. So here I took a couple of pieces of track and just laid out about 2 foot by 8 foot is the rough dimension. And the spur will run there up to the wall, and maybe build a little doghouse on top of that so I could keep some rolling stock in here. But I can also use this for shunting cars. So here you can see a rough layout. This is where the points would end, where I can start building the switch here. And this is the main track here, and this will be that spur going off to the left. And I just laid some track out as an example. The thing is, I think I'm going to try and build this switch in place. I know that's not standard, but I don't mind being on my knees a little bit just for one switch. But that allows me to keep this rail all the way through as a guide rail. It's already in the ground. This rail as well. This piece of track here is already curved, bent into the curve. So I think this will give me the greatest amount of success. I really need this to be smooth because I go through this on every single trip. So the first thing I've got to do, I want to dig down and start replacing these little wooden sleepers here with some composite lumber. And I'm going to tie this track down to these new composite pieces before I start cutting any of the rail. Well, and that's the plan. So I better go get into my work clothes and get busy. So the first thing I've got to do is I want to make some marks on the existing track where I have to make some cuts, and that way I can take some measurements. I'm not going to cut anything just yet. Since this is the first switch I've ever built, I'm kind of making it up as I go along. I decided not to try and fabricate my own frog just yet. These I got from Maxitrack, from Michelle at Maxitrack, and they're for 5-inch gauge. And since my rail is culp rail, it's sort of in between typical 1 inch to the foot scale rail and 1.5 inches. So I was able to find at the metal store some aluminum that shims this up to the right height for me. So that's not scary at all. So I'm going to make a few marks on the rail, and then I'll take some measurement as to the length of sleepers that I need. So I'm going to start with a 2-foot long tie that will connect both pieces of track, and then I'll work my way back and make a list of cutoffs that I need. So deciding what to use for sleepers on your railroad is kind of a major decision because it can be quite an expense. And where I live, there's no one really conveniently located with any pre-molded ties out of plastic or anything like that. So for most of the railroad I used redwood, because I could get that at the big box store, and then in a few places I've used some composite decking boards. And I'm going to use these composite boards for the switch, but I was over at Lowe's the other day and they are trying to get rid of these things. 8 foot long, about 5.5 wide, composite decking boards. And the salesman said, we are just trying to get rid of these as quick as we can. So they were going for like $6 a piece for these 8-footers. That's a huge savings. So I've got a whole pile of them here that I'm going to use. Not traditional, but they should last forever and ever. And going to the trouble of building a switch, you want something a little more permanent than just some stock lumber. So here's my cutoff list, and let's get busy on the chop saw. Alright, let's lay these out and take a look. Alright, that's the top of the switch coming down. I'm going to need a couple of more shorties, and then a couple of long ones for the actual points mechanism. Well, let's take a look at one of these planks. At first glance, you may think that this would not at all be ideal material for a sleeper railroad tie. And as I mentioned before, most of the ties on my railroad are ripped down 2x6s. So I basically have about a 2x3 redwood tie on all the railroad. But I'm going to go with a little more permanent, especially now since these planks were on sale. I got such a great price. They become quite affordable, and I probably should go over to the store and buy a bunch more of these things so that I could use this to repair any of the rotted out ties that I have on the railroad. So take a look at this and see what I have planned. Why is it that our table saws always end up being an assembly table? It never fails. Okay, so here's our little plank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip this in half first. So let's take care of that. Then I'm going to put these two back to back. I'm going to take a couple of small deck screws, and I'm just going to fire a couple deck screws in this. So it'll look like this when I screw it together. You can see I fired 2 or 3 deck screws in there. And the advantage of this, not only is it's heavy, this is what will show on the ground, which doesn't look horribly unwood-like. But look at this profile. All of this groove action is going to provide a nice anchoring in the ballast. So it's heavy, it's almost the same size as the wood ties, maybe not quite as deep, but instead of a smooth side, it's got all of these grooves in there that will grab and hold this thing in place. So I think this is going to turn out to be pretty cool. So we'll take this little guy, kind of give him a little clamp. And fire in a couple little deck screws. And there we are. Easy as that. That way, when I go to the trouble of building the switch, these things are not going to rot out tomorrow. It's going to last a long time. Well, there they are, kind of lined up. This is the long tie with the space down the center where that throw arm or throw lever is going to go. That flower box is going to have to be moved. And you can see how it all splays out. A little extra coverage under the frog. And then when we get to the spur there, then we'll do some shorties. Well, now to dig out some ballast, pull out the wood ties, and where I can, fasten these to our guide rail. But that's going to wrap it up for this week. We'll pick it up right where we left off next time, and I hope you can join me then. Rodney and I are going to take off. Get busy, get something done. We'll see you later. Thanks for watching.